In the rolling hills of southwestern Ohio, where Little Miami River winds its way through the quiet suburbs and dense woodlands, a bizarre legend has taken root. But what if I told you it's not just a legend, and that if you ever find yourself near this river, you will certainly remember this story, not to mention the actual video proof. So, on a chilly March night in 1972, Officer Ray Shockey of the Loveland Police Department was patrolling a lonely stretch of road near the Little Miami River. And as his cruiser's headlights cut through the mist rising from the water, Shockey saw something that would change his life forever. So there, crouched by the roadside, was a creature unlike anything he'd ever encountered. Standing about 3 to 4 feet tall, it had this leathery, frog-like skin and a face that seemed to blend amphibian and humanoid features together. And as the headlights actually hit the creature, it started to turn its head, eyes reflecting, but with an intelligent gleam. And before Shockey could even react, the being leapt over the guardrail and disappeared into the murky waters of the Little Miami. Despite adrenaline rising, the officer sat in his cruiser, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. Shockey would later say to his skeptical colleagues, "I know what I saw. It wasn't a man in a suit, and it sure as hell wasn't any normal animal. This thing, it was something else entirely." But 2 weeks later, Officer Mark Matthews had his own encounter with what came to be known as the Loveland Frog. And just like any normal night, he was out on patrol when he got a call about an animal that was on the road. So he was dispatched to that site, and when Matthews arrived, he saw the exact same creature matching Shockey's description. But this time, fear overriding him, the officer actually drew his weapon. But he hesitated at that moment to fire, unsure if what he was dealing with. And then, like before, the creature escaped into the river, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of unease in the community. And right after that, as news of the sighting spread, locals began to come forward with their own stories. Tales of strange creatures seen right along the riverbanks that had been circulating for years. But like almost all in the paranormal community, most have been too afraid of ridicule to speak up. And longtime Loveland resident Martha Clement said, "My grandpa used to tell us kids about these quote-unquote river devils when I was growing up. We thought they were just stories, to keep us from playing too close to the water. Now, I'm not so sure." Clearly, at this point, it's a local phenomenon that is growing because cryptozoologists and paranormal investigators flocked to Loveland, eager to unravel this mystery. Some of them even drew connections to the Native American legends of water spirits, while others speculated about mutant creatures resulting from industrial pollution in that river. But Dr. Allison Weaver, a biologist specializing in amphibians, offered a more measured perspective. She said, while it's tempting to, jump to these fantastical conclusions, we have to consider more mundane explanations. She said large aquatic salamanders, like the quote-unquote hellbender, can grow to surprising sizes and might be mistaken for something more mysterious in the right conditions. But for many Loveland residents, no ordinary explanation could account for what they had experienced. And reports continued to trickle in over the years. Glimpses of shadowy figures along the riverbank. Strange tracks that were actually found in the mud. And these eerie, soft, and constant cries echoing across the water on foggy nights. But in 1985, the legend of the Loveland Frog took an unexpected turn. A local businessman, Sam Jacobs, claimed to have captured one of these creatures. Nobody in the town believed it until he actually showed them, and he presented this large taxidermied specimen that appeared to match the description from the 1972 sightings. And for a brief moment, it seemed that the mystery actually might be solved. But upon closer examination, Jacob's Loveland frog was revealed to be an elaborate hoax, a combination of various animal parts and clever sculpting. And when he got caught, he said, "I just wanted to bring some attention to Loveland. I never expected it to go as far as it did." And the hoax might have discredited the entire Loveland frog phenomenon, but for many, it only deepened the mystery. Why go to such lengths to fake a creature if there wasn't some truth to the legend? Well, as the years passed by again, sightings became less frequent, but the legend of the Loveland frog remained firmly entrenched in its local lore, and it became a part of the region's identity, inspiring everything from quirky town festivals to craft beer names. But for those who had encountered the creature firsthand, like officers Shockey and Matthews, the Loveland frog was far more than just a colorful local legend. People can believe what they want, Matthews said in a rare interview years after his encounter. And then he said, "But I know what I saw that night. It wasn't a hoax. It wasn't a misidentification. There's something out there in those waters that science hasn't explained yet." And in recent years, a new generation of cryptid hunters has taken up the search for the Loveland frog, armed with night vision cameras and environmental DNA sampling techniques. These investigators hope to finally provide conclusive evidence of the creature's existence. I mean, we're not just running around in the woods with flashlights, explained Tessa Riordan, who is the founder of the Ohio Cryptid Research Society. She said, "We are applying vigorous scientific methods to investigate these sightings. If the Loveland frog is out there, we're going to find it." And their efforts have yielded some intriguing, if inconclusive, results. For one, unusual DNA sequences have been isolated from those water samples, and infrared cameras have captured fleeting images of large, unidentified creatures moving through the underbrush along the river. I'm sorry, but to the normal person like me or you, isn't that enough for us to have our common sense kick in and be like, okay, there's something out there that cannot be explained. There's something. But yet there's always skeptics when it comes to this, and I wonder why. But perhaps the most compelling recent development actually came in 2016, when a group of teenagers, believe it or not, claimed to have encountered and filmed a creature matching the Loveland frog's description while playing Pokemon Go near the river. And the video was shaky and brief, but it does show a bipedal, frog-like creature lumbering across a moonlit field before disappearing right into the shadows. Now, while skeptics were quick to dismiss it as a hoax or a misidentified known animal, the footage reignited interest in the Loveland frog legend. Folklorist Dr. Emily Chambers noted, "Whether you believe in the Loveland frog or not, these stories tell us something important about our relationship with the natural world. They remind us that there are still mysteries out there, still things that we don't fully understand. In an age where we think we've explained everything, creatures like the Loveland frog challenge us to keep an open mind." And if you like the story so far, please hit that like button and know that I will always try to bring you the best, most mysterious paranormal content. But for the residents of Loveland and the surrounding areas, the legend of the frog has become a part of their region's fabric. It's a reminder of a time when the boundaries between the known and the unknown were less certain, when any shadow on the riverbank could actually hide a mystery. Local historian there, Gerald Fisher, said, "Do I believe there's a race of frogmen living in the Little Miami? Well, I don't know. But I do know that this legend has brought our community back together and has made us look at our environment with a sense of wonder. And in a world that can seem all too ordinary sometimes, a little wonder isn't such a bad thing." And as twilight falls over the Little Miami River, the waters whisper with secrets. Perhaps in the deepening shadows something stirs. Something not quite frog and not quite man, but a creature that exists in the boundary that spaces between the world we know and the world that we have yet to understand. One such tale originates from the sleepy town of Palmyra, Maine, where a man's life was forever changed by a chilling encounter with a creature that defies explanation. The autumn air was brisk as Eric Martin was on the porch of his secluded property in Palmyra, Maine. The trees rustled with the gentle breeze and their leaves a tapestry of orange and red. Eric, who was a pragmatic man and a veteran, found solace in the quiet of his rural home. His wife, Shelley, and their two children, Chelsea and Sean, had joined him in seeking a life away from the city's hustle and bustle. And it was October 2009, a night just like any other, or so they thought. Shelley was inside preparing for dinner, and Chelsea was upstairs in her room, and Sean was playing with his toy cars in the living room. Eric, sipped his tea, enjoying just the serenity of the evening, when he noticed something very unusual. Small orbs of light dancing through the trees at the edge of their property. At first he kind of, squinted, trying to make sense of this phenomenon, and his first thought was, it's poachers. So he said, Shelley, do you see that? And that's when Shelley joined him on the porch and said, what is that? Those lights, it's probably nothing, but I'm gonna go check it out. Why don't you keep the kids inside? So at this point, Eric grabbed his rifle, a precaution more than anything, and Shelley was very uneasy with guns, so she had insisted that they keep them locked up in the barn. Tonight, though, Eric felt a nagging sense of urgency almost, and he motioned for Sean to join him, thinking, a quick walk would be harmless. As he kind of reassured his son, he said, stay close, Sean, we're just gonna go take a quick look. So they stepped out into the chilly night, and the flashlight was cutting through the darkness as they approached the tree line. And when they got there, the lights at this point had vanished, replaced just by this eerie silence. And the forest, usually alive with nocturnal sounds, seemed to be almost holding its breath. Dad, did you hear that? Sean whispered. Eric then kind of strained to listen. He could hear a low growl echoed from the shadows, followed by a rustling in the underbrush. His heart pounded and he said, yeah, we should probably get back. So at that point, he gripped Sean's hand tighter and they retreated to the safety of their house, unease gnawing at Eric's gut at this point. The very next day, Chelsea and her boyfriend decided to take the dogs for a walk, and the crisp air and vibrant fall colors provided a perfect backdrop for their outing. And the dogs, energetic and curious, actually led them deeper into the woods than usual. And suddenly the dogs stopped, and their ears perked up, and their noses were twitching. Chelsea said, what is it, boy? And that's when the dogs bolted, pulling Chelsea and her boyfriend towards this dense thicket. They stumbled upon almost like this makeshift den, and the smell of decay was just wafting throughout the air, and Chelsea's heart kind of raced as she heard this deep growl from within the den. Her boyfriend's face kind of got a little pale, and he said, hey guys, let's get out of here. And at this point, they hurried back home, the encounter kind of leaving them shaken. And that evening, they shared their experience with Eric and Shelley, and the family felt an undercurrent of fear kind of just settling in. Their once peaceful home was now tinged with unease. A few nights later, Eric and Shelley were sitting on the porch enjoying the quiet when a sudden sense of dread washed over Eric. I mean, he really couldn't explain it, but he knew something was wrong. So he said, Shelley, we need to go inside right now. And Shelley saw the seriousness in his eyes and really didn't argue. So they hurried inside and locked the doors, and Eric turned on the floodlights, illuminating the gravel path leading to their home. And that's when they saw it. 5 sets of eyes glowed in the darkness, reflecting the light with an unnatural intensity. What is that? Shelley whispered. And that's when the figure in the middle stood up on 2 legs, towering over 7 feet tall. It had the head of a wolf and the body of like a man, a grotesque blend between human and beast. The creature then stared at them, its eyes seemingly piercing their souls. Eric said, we can't stay here. I need to get the guns from the barn. but the barn felt miles away with those things lurking outside. So instead, he decided to get the truck and get the family out of there. But Eric stepped outside and his hands were trembling so bad as he fumbled with the keys, and the night was unnaturally still. The only sound was his labored breathing, and he accidentally dropped the keys, cursing under his breath. Panic surged through him like electricity as he glanced over his shoulder, and the creatures hadn't moved, but their eyes tracked his every step. So he ran back inside, slamming the door behind him. And that's when he said to his family, "We have to barricade ourselves in." So they went and they locked the doors and the windows, and their hearts were pounding, mind you, during all this. And for hours they sat, huddled together, kitchen knives clutched in their hands. And all that time, the creatures just circled the house, their growls and sniffs echoing through the walls. They scratched at the doors, testing it for weaknesses, their claws leaving deep gouges in the wood. At this point, it was serious, and they were desperate, so Shelly actually dialed 911, and she said, "There are creatures outside our house. They're trying to get in." The operator, of course, sounded skeptical and said,
"Ma'am, it's probably just some animals. Stay inside and they'll go away."
And Shelly said, "No, you don't understand. Please, these aren't normal animals. Please, send someone." But the response was really dismissive. The family was on their own. And hours dragged by, each minute an eternity. The growls and scratches continued, a constant reminder of the terror just outside their door. Eric's mind raced with all the possibilities. What are these creatures? Why are they targeting my family? He thought of his military training, the things that he had seen in combat, but nothing had prepared him for this. The fear was primal, a deep-seated horror that gnawed at his resolve. Shelly then clung to him, her eyes wide open in fear, and just said, "What are we gonna do?" And Eric said, "We stay until morning. They can't get in." And he was trying to sound confident, but of course he wasn't sure, and the night seemed endless, the darkness pressing in on them. Chelsea and Sean were huddled together, and their young faces were pale and in fear. "Dad, what if they get in?" Sean asked. His voice was literally small and scared. And Eric said, "They won't, I promise." Even though at that point he was doubting his own words. As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, the growling and scratching ceased. So Eric cautiously peeked outside, and the creatures were gone. So he unlocked the door and he stepped out, his legs weak with relief. The ground was covered in massive footprints larger than any wolf's, deep claw marks marred into the door and walls, a testament to the night's terror. And they found tufts of black fur near the door, coarse and thick. Eric picked one up, with his hand still shaking. "This isn't from any animal I've ever seen," he said. It was at this point that the family decided to leave, unable to stay in a place that had become a nightmare. They packed their belongings and moved, the memory of that night still haunting them. And in the days that followed, Eric tried to make sense of what had just happened. So he reached out to local authorities, but their response was the same. It must have been a bear or a wolf. But Eric knew better. He had seen the creatures, felt their malevolent presence. They were something else, something otherworldly. And the family's story spread through Palmyra, Maine, met with a mix of skepticism and fear. Some believed them, sharing their own strange tales of sightings and unearthly howls. But of course others, just dismissed it as a figment of overactive imaginations. But for Eric and his family, the terror was all too real. And moving to a new town, brought some peace, but the memory of that night never left them. Eric found himself more vigilant and always on edge. Shelly struggled with nightmares, her sleep plagued by the image of those glowing eyes. Chelsea and Sean tried to move on, but the fear always lingered. Eric delved into research seeking answers, and he read about cryptids, creatures of folklore that defied explanation. And then he read about the Dogman, a creature described in legends as part wolf, part human, matched what he had seen. But knowing didn't bring him any comfort. Now, there's actually more to the story, which I'm about to tell you right now, but it's of course not authenticated, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least tell you what I found. Supposedly, Eric had decided to confront his fear, to understand what had terrorized his family, so he reached out to paranormal investigators, hoping they could shed light on the mystery. and they listened to his story, intrigued by the details. And the investigator actually said, "We've heard of similar encounters. These creatures, whatever they are, seem to appear in remote areas. People describe them as dog-like, but with human characteristics." Eric felt a mixture of relief and dread. He wasn't alone, but that meant others had faced the same terror, and the investigators agreed to visit Palmyra to gather evidence and hopefully provide answers. So Eric returned to Palmyra with the investigators, his heart heavy with apprehension. The town looked the same, but it felt different. It felt darker. They visited the old property, now abandoned, and the memories just flooded back, the fear as fresh as if it happened yesterday. So the investigators set up the equipment, scanning for any signs of the creatures, and they actually found the same massive footprints and the same tufts of hair. And then one investigator said, "There's something here, and it's not of this world." Imagine seeing something so big and so fast that your mind kind of just refuses to believe it. This one actually comes with video proof. And if you love paranormal and supernatural stories like this, be sure to follow and also make sure to hit that like button. Without any further ado, as of now, let's get into it. Okay, I want you to imagine, out of hundreds of passengers on the Durango train, only a handful saw it. A towering figure, perfectly camouflaged, moving like a shadow through the mountains. Imagine seeing something so big and so fast that your mind kind of just refuses to believe it. I mean, that's exactly what happened to this couple on their Colorado adventure. And they have the footage to back it up. Okay, so it was a peaceful Sunday when Shannon and Stetson Parker, a Wyoming couple, boarded the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge railroad, expecting nothing more than just this beautiful scenic trip. But what they got instead would haunt them forever. So the couple was traveling along this picturesque route, scanning the hills for elk as the train, clattered along the tracks. I mean, this was one of their favorite pastimes, to find these beautiful elk while on the train and take these amazing pictures of them. It was something that they both truly adore doing. For Stetson, who was forever the outdoorsman, he was always on alert, his eyes darting across the ridgelines. But what he saw was far from any wildlife that he expected. And Shannon, well, she was at that moment preoccupied with her camera, hoping to capture the perfect shot of the sprawling wilderness. That's when she heard Stetson mutter something under his breath, but just loud enough to catch her attention. "Bigfoot," he said, his voice laced with both wonder and disbelief. Shannon jerked her head up. "What?" She looked in the direction that her husband was looking at and pointing at that moment, squinting to see beyond the golden sagebrush that covered the hillsides. I mean, you're on a train and somebody says Bigfoot, your immediate thought is probably no way. I'm probably going to look up and they're either, playing a joke on me, or it's going to be a bear or something, that I can't quite make out. Well, that wasn't the case. Because there, right there in the distance, stood this towering figure. It was moving slowly but with a fast pace, seemingly camouflaged in the sage, blending with the muted browns and grays of the mountain, and its massive frame was unmistakable. And from the footage of which you will see, you can clearly alleviate any doubts of, oh, this is an animal like a bear or a wolf. I mean, it's truly amazing, but that's actually for you to decide. So as you can imagine though, when seeing this creature, the adrenaline in both of them starts to pump. And Shannon, was fumbling her phone, her fingers panicked clumsily from the sudden surge of adrenaline. But I tell you, once she had it lined up in her hand, she clicked away just as fast as she could, trying to capture what she could barely comprehend. And that's when from behind them, another passenger, a man whose name they actually never caught, raised his phone up as well and started filming. And this video that he was recording could absolutely make history. Not to mention, his video would go viral within a matter of hours. But in that moment, on that train, The enormity of what they were witnessing didn't fully sink in. Could it really be the ever elusive creature, the Bigfoot that had captivated imaginations for generations? Well, Stetson described this figure as being at least 6 or 7 feet tall, though it was difficult to judge from, such a far distance. In reality, it could have been over 8 or 9 feet tall. And one of the most amazing and somewhat creepy information was that this being might be not only sentient, but truly smart, because the creature had paused, squatting low as if trying to stay hidden amongst the brush. And for a moment right then, it seemed to disappear, blending so perfectly into the landscape that even seasoned hikers might have missed it. But right then is when their eyes suddenly caught it again, and there it was. That same cryptid that had been reportedly spotted in this region for decades, roaming the remote wilderness of the San Juan National Forest. The San Juan and La Plata counties had long been a hotspot for Sasquatch sightings. Since 1989, there had been 4 documented cases in that area, and the most recent being in 2008 when a hiker encountered this large, hairy figure on the Crater Lake Trail. But this was different. Okay, so it's monumental to say that Shannon and Stetson weren't alone in their sighting. Out of the hundreds of passengers on that train, only 3 or 4 people had noticed it. The rest were, totally oblivious, lost in their thoughts or busy chatting on their phone, unaware of the mysterious figure lurking right on the hillside. I wonder how many people on that train saw the commotion but didn't even care to look up. I mean, imagine that being you, missing out on the most potential elusive creature ever. No, that is why I personally, my head is always on a swivel. But that night back in their cabin, Shannon and Stetson pored over these photos in that viral video. And the figure's movements were eerily human. Yet there was just something that was off. And I know, some of you are probably thinking, well, I could debunk this easily. If it looks like a Sasquatch, then it's definitely just a human in a Bigfoot costume walking around to prank the train. But to do that, that would require a lot of commitment. I mean, you would have to know first the schedule of the train. And you would have to be out in the hot heat, just walking around in that hot suit, hoping that somebody caught you on camera. I mean, it's possible, but Stetson and Shannon say that it moved too deliberately, too fluidly to be a person in a costume. And the way that it just seemed to melt into the background when it crouched down, Stetson was convinced that no human could mimic that kind of seamless camouflage. Makes you think, how smart really are these things? But there was something else, a nagging detail that he hadn't shared yet. And okay, I won't leave you in suspense for long, I'll share it with you now. So, Stetson, earlier on, before he'd spotted the creature, he had heard something strange. And it was low, guttural, almost like a growl, but so faint that, he dismissed it as the wind rushing through the narrow valleys. But now, though, after seeing this, the sound just kept echoing in his mind, and he says, what if that was Bigfoot's call? A warning, perhaps, to stay away. And rumors then swirled for days following their sighting. The internet exploded with theories. Some speculated that the creature was nothing more than a person in a suit. Perhaps even a marketing stunt by the Sasquatch Expedition Campers, which is a company based in nearby Silverton. The company is known for its tongue-in-cheek humor and cryptid-themed merchandise, issued a cheeky denial, though, claiming it wasn't us. But of course, they accompanied that statement with photos of someone in a Bigfoot suit working on their campers, leaving just enough room for doubt. Could this really be just a huge, clever hoax out in the middle of nowhere? Because others, a lot of others, were way less skeptical. The Bigfoot Field Research Organization, BFRO, pointed to the long history of sightings in that area, suggesting that this might indeed be the real deal. A creature so adept to blending into the environment that it managed to avoid detection for decades. But in the weeks that followed, Shannon and Stetson couldn't shake the memory of what they had seen, obviously. And their friends, of course, laughed it off. But for those who knew them well, at least, they could see it in their eyes. The Parkers were changed by that experience. They were believers now. And then one night, weeks later, Stetson received a call from an old friend, a seasoned outdoorsman who had lived in the region for years. And he had seen that viral video. He had heard the stories and decided to share his own experience, something that he had kept to himself for nearly a decade.
It's an elusive creature. Alright, just squat it down. Yeah, let me see your camera, I'll do it.
And he let Stetson know that while hiking in the San Juan Mountains, he had encountered what he described as a massive shadow, moving through the trees, something too large to be human and too fast to be a bear. And he had never told anyone, fearing, that they would label him as crazy. But now the pieces were starting to fall into place. What if Bigfoot wasn't just a legend? What if the creature had been here all along, watching from the shadows, perfectly camouflaged in the rugged wilderness? And as Shannon and Stetson lay awake that night, they couldn't help but wonder, if they had just been a little bit closer, a little bit braver, would they have seen more? Or was the mystery of Bigfoot meant to remain just that, a mystery? And just know that I appreciate you all, and that's all I got for you guys today. I will see you next time. Cheers.